Hello, everyone. This is the third video related to my reading of the Shea Memorandum. The Gerald Shea Memorandum was written by retired district attorney for San Luis Obispo County, California, Gerald Shea. It was regarding Israeli intelligence gathering operations in the U.S. leading up to the September 11th, 2001 attacks. Today, I will be covering chapters 5 through 7. So let's get into it. Chapter 5, the future hijackers and FBI suspects. And just a forewarning, I am a little sick, so if my voice is hard of hearing, I apologize. So, Section 5, the future hijackers and FBI suspects. Section A, operations in Hollywood, Florida. It is clear that Hollywood was the core of operations for the future hijackers and their collaborators. All of the hijackers of 3 of the 4 aircrafts that were commandeered on September 11th lived in Hollywood or its immediate environs. Let me actually go to focus mode. Collapse this ribbon. All right, there we go. All right, that's better. Apologies. All right, let's start from the top. Section A of Chapter 5. Operations on Hollywood, Florida. It is clear that Hollywood was the core of operations for the future hijackers and their collaborators. All the hijackers of the 3 of the 4 aircraft that were commandeered on September 11th lived in Hollywood or its immediate environs in the month leading up to the hijackings. These included all the hijackers of American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston, which crashed into the World Trade Center's North Tower, who lived in Hollywood itself. They were Mohammed Atta, known as the pilot, Abdulaziz Al-Omari, Walid Al-Sheri, Wail Al-Sheri, and Satam Al-Sukami. 2 of the 4 hijackers of United Airlines Flight 93 from Newark, who crashed in Pennsylvania, known as Shanksville, Pennsylvania, also known as the Pennsylvania plane, were Ziad Jarrah, Ahmed Al-Nami, who also lived in Hollywood. 2 of the 5 hijackers of United Airlines Flight 175, which crashed into the World Trade Center's South Tower, and collectively with the North Tower plane, Marwan Al-Shehi, Mohan Al-Sheri, lived in Hollywood as well. The 2 remaining hijackers on those planes, Fayez Bani Hamad and Hamza Al-Ghamdi on the South Tower plane, and Saeed Al-Ghamdi and Ahmed Al-Haznawi in the Pennsylvania plane, lived in Delray Beach. Khalid Al-Midar and Nawaf Al-Hazmi, overall leaders of the future hijackers and hijackers of the Pentagon plane, had addresses in both Bergen County, New Jersey, and in Hollywood and Delray Beach, respectively. Many of the above future hijackers and Hollywood addresses interspersed with or within 100 yards of the members of the Israeli DEA groups, as shown on Map 2. Section B, timing of operations of both groups in the Hollywood area. Hijackers timeline. The Commission has in its possession 2 hijackers timelines which appear to trace the future hijackers movements in the periods leading up to September 11th. They were compiled by the FBI and are dated November 14th and December 5th, 2003. The FBI has confirmed that it prepared, edited, and declassified the hijackers timelines for the Commission and that any decision to release them would be the Commission's alone. Thus far, however, the Commission has declined to release them. There are, nevertheless, a number of hijacker timelines prepared by individuals or groups that are generally available. One of those timelines, entitled The Annotated Timeline of the 9/11 Hijackers for Researchers, dated May 13th, 2002, represents that it has been compiled from public sources and is used as a reference here. It is available at freerepublic.com, which is actually still an active site today. The hijacker timeline, though dated in a number of respects, it was issued a year and a half before the FBI hijackers timelines, appears generally consistent with publicly available U.S. government reports on the hijackers movements, including information from the FBI's hijacker timelines to the extent discernible from citation in the Commission's footnotes, the Commission's staff statements, the Joint Committee report, other governmental reports, and accounts in the established press. Subsection 2, Israeli DEA groups. As to the timings of the operations of the Israelis in Florida, the Israeli DEA group, led by Hanan Sarfati, was stopped in Tampa on March 1st of 2001, as noted above, and at that time provided their Hollywood area addresses to DEA agents. Sarfati said that he had arrived in the United States approximately 1 year earlier, but, as noted above, refused to state what he had been doing since that time, or for the 2 prior years since he had left the army. Another group based in the Hollywood area, led by Pierre Segalovitz, was stopped on May 3rd, 2001, and provided their addresses. Segalovitz had arrived in the United States on January 17th, 2001. Subsection 3. Future hijackers. As to the hijackers, a number of them have lived in the Hollywood area or elsewhere in Florida well before 2000 and 2001. Hani Hanjour, the pilot of the Pentagon plane and a member of the New Jersey hijacker group, had lived in the Hollywood area for a time in 1996 in Miramar, a few miles southwest of Hollywood. Saeed Al-Ghamdi had lived in Daytona Beach for several years in the 90s, and Walid Al-Shari had taken flight lessons there in 1997. Muhammad Atta had also lived in Daytona Beach in the mid-90s. That's interesting because I believe in the 90s, Muhammad Atta was in Germany attending school for architecture. I don't recall the date, but it may have not compiled with this date. But however, I do believe that Muhammad Atta was attending school in Hamburg, Germany for architecture. Anyways, because he had a scholarship to travel and study abroad. He went from Egypt to Germany. In mid-2000, the leaders of the Florida hijackers arrived in Florida to prepare for the hijackings and were followed in 2001 by their subordinates. Thus, Muhammad Atta, Marwan al-Shehi, and Ziad Jarrah arrived between May and June 2000. All of them attended flight schools in Venice, Florida, not far from Fort Myers, where the Hollywood Israeli DEA groups were later found operating. Although the Israeli DEA groups were questioned in Fort Myers by DEA agents a few months after the hijackers had left for Hollywood, the reactive nature of the DEA report makes it difficult to track the timing of the Israeli group's movements, except when they were spying on the DEA or to the extent they disclosed their movements, as they sometimes did, to DEA or INS agents or other law enforcement authorities. Atta and al-Shehi were in the Hollywood area by the end of December 2000 when they took flight training courses in Opa-locka, about 15 miles southwest of Hollywood. Ziad Jarrah took flight training courses the following month in January 2001 in Virginia Gardens, about 20 miles south of Hollywood. Atta and al-Shehi settled permanently on the east coast of Florida, somewhere in the Hollywood area in mid to late February of 2001. They procured a mailbox address on Sheridan Street in Hollywood, sometime early in the year. Ziad Jarrah returned to Hollywood from abroad in April. The pilot's subordinates arrived in the area at various dates between March and June. Subsection C. Activities of both groups in Oklahoma. Oklahoma City and Norman, about 15 miles south of Oklahoma City, were also an important locus of activity for the future hijackers. Muhammad Atta and Marwan al-Shehi had toured the Airman Flight School in Norman at the end of June 2000. Zacharias Moussaoui, a suspected potential hijacker, moved to Norman in February 2001. He's actually currently in prison, Supermax prison. So he was supposedly the 20th hijacker. Anyways, he moved to Norman in February 2001 to take flight lessons at Airman. In May, Moussaoui had considered joining the future hijackers in Hollywood and inquired about flying lessons at the Pan Am International Flight School in Miami. In August of 2001, however, he left for the Pan Am Flight School in Minnesota, where he raised suspicions and was arrested. 5 other individuals on the May 2002 FBI suspect list lived in Norman, including at least 2 roommates of Moussaoui, Hussein Alatas and Mukarram Ali. Nawaf al-Hazmi had also been in Oklahoma. He was, as the commission of the committees know, an important leader of the hijackers and an attendee at meetings in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, also known as the Malaysia meeting. On April 1st, 2001, al-Hazmi was stopped for speeding on Interstate 40 in western Oklahoma, apparently headed for Oklahoma City and Moussaoui and Norman. The Israeli DEA groups were also active in Oklahoma City during the spring of 2001. On March 28th of 2001, the day following the DEA midnight raid near Dallas, an Israeli DEA group on their way to Oklahoma City arrived at DFW Airport from Frankfurt. In a scene reminiscent of the Keystone Cops and under clandestine DEA and INS surveillance, they tried to avoid being detected as a group and followed. The 3 arriving Israelis were Yoni Engel, Yotam Degai, and Or Alroy. Alroy was an associate of Michael Kalmanovich. Engel was a former Israeli company commander. The 3 Israelis were traveling with an American, Eli Rabinovitz, After clearing customs, they met with an unidentified woman on the curb and then temporarily split up. Rabinovitz stayed with the woman while Engel, DeGuy, and Alroy walked down on the sidewalk next to the terminal. A van with California plates and registered in the name of a used car auction house pulled up to the curb, and as DeGuy ducked into the second terminal, Engel and Alroy got in, and it quickly left. The van returned in a few minutes. The guy emerged from the terminal and climbed in. The van sped away again, only to return a third time to pick up Rabinovitz before finally leaving the airport. That's interesting. I mean, if I were someone from the INS or running a clandestine operation, basically to spy on these people to see what they were doing, either from the DEA or the INS, it wouldn't be, at least in my opinion, it wouldn't be a smart move to continue coming around because you could just continue to match that license plate to the van. It's not like it's changing every time they come back and pick somebody else up. So that's an interesting tactic there. Not really smart in my opinion, but anyways. On April 4th, Engel, DeGuy, and Alroy were next questioned in St. Louis, where the headquarters of Amdocs, the Israeli communications software company, are located. They had visited Oklahoma City at the same time between April 1st and April 4th. Nawaf al-Hazmi was there presumably to meet with Basawi. They told INS agents that they had traveled to Dallas from New York City and not, as the DEA and INS knew, on a flight from Frankfurt. On April 30th of 2001, an Air Force alert was issued from Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma City concerning the possible intelligence collection effort being conducted by Israeli art students. On May 17th, 4 Israelis were reported in the Midwest City area between Oklahoma City and Norman. They stated that they were there to promote the Israeli art. They were charged with visa violations and were booked into the Oklahoma City jail at the instance of the INS. Bond was initially set at $25,000 each. All 4 requested voluntary departure from the U.S., of course, because as we know, these art students' first crime that they had committed was visa violations. It wasn't clandestine intelligence gathering, it was visa violations. That's why we haven't been able to bring the said people back to the United States to further continue questioning, because they were basically taken back to Israel. Very interesting, because the first crime that they had committed was a visa violation. Subsection D, Dallas, a probable training area for the Israeli DEA groups. An unusually large number of Israeli DEA group members were located in Irving, Texas, an area that does not appear to have been frequented by the future hijackers or by many FBI suspects. Texas, however, and in particular Dallas and Irving, appears to have been an important staging area and training ground for the Israeli DEA groups, given the presence there of a key license between senior recruiting personnel in Israel and the Israeli DEA groups in the United States, DEA and INS surveillance of Israeli DEA groups' arrivals at DFW airports, and the considerable telecommunication sophistication and expertise of DEA group associates in Dallas, and large numbers of Israeli DEA group personnel, many of whom were expelled from the United States after a midnight raid conducted by the DEA and the INS. As we have seen, Tomer Ben-Dor, stopped by the INS and the DEA at the DFW airport in May of 2001, worked for an Israeli wiretapping company and had within him a computer program referring to DEA groups. He was traveling with Marina Glickman and Zeev Miller, both computer programmers for an Israeli software company. They were both vague and inconsistent about their travel plans. Michael Gall, who had an address in Edgewater, New Jersey, the base of the Israeli New Jersey group, and not far from the headquarters of Mr. Ben-Dor's company, had a relationship with Amdocs, another telecommunications company. Michael Kamanovich and Itay Simon, both of Dallas and LA, were the principal links between the Israeli operation in the United States and 5 Israeli DEA group recruiters in Israel. The DEA and INS conducted a midnight raid on the Israeli DEA group's apartment complex in Irving on the night of March 26th through 27th, 2001, and expelled 13 of their members from the United States on March 31st of 2001. Their transportation out of the country was arranged by the Israeli embassy. Of course it was. And it would be interesting to see what information the DEA and INS had conducted and gathered, given that the 26th and 27th was about 4 and 5 days away from their expelling out of the country. I wonder if that information has been made public. I'm not too sure. I can look further into that. But once again, as you can see here, first crime they had committed was a visa violation. So Exhibit B lists the names of members of the Israeli DEA groups and of the future hijackers and FBI suspects located in Hollywood, Florida, in Hudson and Bergen counties, and New Jersey, in Oklahoma City / Norman, Oklahoma, in San Diego, in Los Angeles, and in Dallas, all during the periods leading up to September 11th. The map of the United States attached as map 4 shows all of these locations and illustrates as well as the presence of both groups during the period is Wichita, Kansas, Louisville, and Lexington, Kentucky, Atlanta, Georgia, Tampa, and Venice, Fort Myers, Florida, and Arlington, Fredericksburg, and Virginia. Wow, even more. Section 6. This is a small section, but this is reports concerning the surveillance activities of the Israeli DEA groups. As noted above, almost immediately after September 11th, credible reports emerged of Israeli warnings in August of 2001 of an imminent large-scale terrorist attack on the United States. One television network reported in a 4-part series in December of 2001 that investigators suspected that the Israeli DEA groups may have gathered intelligence about the attacks in advance and not shared it. A highly placed investigator said that there are tie-ins, but when asked for details, he flatly refused to describe them, saying evidence linking the Israeli to 9/11 is classified. I cannot tell you about evidence that has been gathered. It is classified information. The Ford, the highly respected American journal, at first discounted Fox's account, but an article 3 months later reported that far from pointing to Israeli spying against U.S. government and military facilities, the incidents in question, known as the activities of the Israeli DEA groups, appear to represent a case of Israelis in the United States spying on a common enemy, radical Islamic networks suspects of links to the Middle East terrorism. Allegations involved Israelis claiming to be art students who had backgrounds in signals interception and ordnance. It is very difficult to believe, based on the existing evidence and the location of their common central operating basis, that these groups who were clearly spying on the DEA in the United States and were keeping under surveillance Islamic groups in the U.S. with links to Middle Eastern terrorism were not tracking the future hijackers and their collaborators as well. It is very difficult not to believe that. To believe that they weren't tracking the hijackers as well, given that they were in such close proximity to the hijackers throughout their entire operation in the country. Very interesting. But Section 7, Northeastern New Jersey, another vital center of operations for both sides. Subsection A, Hudson and Bergen counties, the operating base of the Israeli New Jersey group. While the Israeli DEA groups were active in Hollywood and elsewhere in the United States, another group of Israelis, known as the Israeli New Jersey Group, and collectively with the Israeli DEA groups, known as the Israeli Groups, was operating in Hudson and Bergen counties in northeastern New Jersey. The Israeli New Jersey Group appears to have been unknown to federal and state law enforcement authorities until September 11th, 2001. On that day, immediately after the first aircraft, the North Tower plane crashed into the World Trade Center. A resident of Bergen County, New Jersey, just across the Hudson River from Lower Manhattan, became alarmed when she saw a group of men celebrating on the roof of a white van in the parking lot of her apartment building. These are also known as the dancing Israelis. She wrote down the license plate number of the van and called the police. The police were told that the men were posing, dancing, and laughing against the background of the disaster, which could be plainly seen across the river. The men were smiling and exchanging high fives. An FBI alert was promptly issued. Vehicle possibly related to New York terrorist attack. White 2000 Chevrolet van with New Jersey registration with Urban Moving Systems sign on the back. And at the time of the first important impact of jetliner into the World Trade Center, 3 individuals with van were seen celebrating after the initial impact and subsequent explosion. The FBI Newark field office requests that if the van is located, hold for the prints and detain the individuals. So yeah, these were the dancing Israelis, also known as Sivan Kurzberg, Paul Kurzberg, Yaron Shmuel, Oded Elner, and Omar Marmari. So if I can pull and find the interview, they actually did an interview on an Israeli TV show when they were basically expelled back to Israel, explaining this entire situation. But yeah, so throughout the entire day on the major news networks as well, this BLO, also known as an FBI Be on the Lookout, for this Urban Moving Systems van was was basically being transmitted, and many people had mistaken that for multiple different vans, but potentially for, and throughout the day, many people had mistaken that the van was actually headed towards the George Washington Bridge. Um, that wasn't true. It was actually stopped in East Rutherford. I can't remember the highway, but it wasn't on the George Washington Bridge. It was stopped much further before that. But yes, they were stopped in the late afternoon, as you can see, at 3:56 p.m. and all questioned. Um, so we'll continue to read this. The men were five Israeli citizens: Sivan Kursberg, the driver of the van; Paul Kursberg; Joran Schmel; Odell Elner; and Omar Marmari. The van was finally stopped in East Rutherford, New Jersey at 3:56 p.m. The driver and passengers were arrested by Sergeant Ravelli and officers DeCarlo and Iannacone of the East Rutherford Police Department. Give me a second. I might be able to actually, let me see, pull up that interview. Let me see. So hopefully I can actually pull up that video. I'll just have to search it up online, and hopefully I can repost it so you guys can have a little bit more context behind the statements made in this report. So anyways, let's go continuing. The local police were soon joined by other law enforcement authorities. Sivan Kursberg was asked several times to come out of the van, but fumbling with a black leather pouch, refused to do so. Officer DeCarlo then forcibly removed him. The FBI agents who arrived on the scene or were otherwise involved included Kevin Donovan, Daniel O'Brien, and Robert F. Taylor, Jr. The FBI ultimately took control of the individuals, the evidence in the van, and the investigation. Sources close to the investigation said they found in the van maps of the city with certain places highlighted, adding that it looked like they knew what was going to happen. Joran Schmel lied to the police as to where the men were at the time of the World Trade Center attacks, saying that they were on the West Side Highway in New York, not celebrating across the Hudson River in New Jersey. He gave his address as 1345 Drexel Avenue in Miami Beach, Florida. Mr. Elner was carrying about $4,700 in a sock-like sack. Sivan Kursberg told the police at the time of his arrest that we are Israeli. We are not your problem. Your problems are now our problems. The Palestinians are the problem. Interesting. Given that they had no idea why they were being pulled over. This is Sivan Kursberg's first statement to police. We are Israeli. We are not your problem. Your problems are now our problems. The Palestinians are the problem. Very interesting as to your first statement when becoming arrested. Anyways, it makes me question what they had known prior to the attacks. And it is definitely evident that they did know prior, given the information gathered from the arrest, as well as them celebrating prior to the impacts on the Trade Center towers. Very interesting. But anyways, all the men were handcuffed, placed in the grass, and given Miranda warnings. A sixth member of the group, Dominic Suter, also known as the owner of Urban Moving Systems, he actually fled to Israel. He does have a Twitter that people like to troll him on, but yeah. Of Fair Lawn, New Jersey, also an Israeli national and the owner of Urban Moving, was later questioned by the FBI at the company offices in Weehawken. The FBI searched Urban Moving's premises for several hours and removed boxes of documents and a dozen computer hard drives. Now we have to remember, Urban Moving Systems wasn't a large company. So having a dozen computer hard drives, that's very interesting. A dozen computers can hold a lot of information. So what was on those computers? What was on the hard drives? Very interesting to see why such a small company, Urban Moving Systems, had so many hard drives. But anyways, also not stated here, there were actually a lot of articles of people's, not articles, but like a lot of furniture related to clients that Urban Moving Systems was working with, still at their warehouses, and their voicemail machine actually had like over 90 voicemails on there of people asking where their stuff was. That's very interesting. So the company actually I know was purchased and I think is rebranded into a different company. But yeah, so that's kind of where it is. But anyways, the leader of the Israeli New Jersey group flees to Israel and becomes an FBI suspect. When the FBI attempted to interview Mr. Suter once more a few days later, he had fled the United States for Israel along with his family. According to the New Jersey State Division of Consumer Affairs, Urban Moving's premises were closed on September 14th of 2001. On December 7th of 2001, a New Jersey judge allowed the state to seize its property. Early in 2002, the New York Department of Transportation revoked Urban Moving's license to do business in that state. Dominic Suter is included on the May 2002 FBI suspect list, along with Mohammed Atta and the other hijackers and suspects under the name and two others he has apparently used, Omid Suter and Omid Levinson. He is given two addresses in New Jersey, his apparent residence in Fair Lawn and an address in Jersey City, very close to that of a number of the other FBI suspects. Though he had fled, Mr. Suter's name did not appear on the October 2001 FBI suspect list. This may be because in early October 2001, the FBI was unaware that Urban Moving Systems was operating in the same area as the future hijackers of the Pentagon plane and visiting hijackers from Florida, including Mohammed Atta. Wow. Explosive information. Subsection C, Hudson and Bergen counties, the staging ground for the future hijackers of the Pentagon plane. It soon became apparent, however, that Hudson and Bergen counties were the second most important locus of the future hijackers' U.S. operations and was the staging ground for the hijacking of the Pentagon plane. The May 2002 FBI suspect list shows, unlike its October 2001 predecessor, that all 5 future hijackers of the Pentagon plane, including Khalid al-Mihdhar, Nawaf al-Hazmi, Salim al-Hazmi, Majed Moked, and Hani Hanjour, lived or had mailing addresses or were otherwise active in towns closely interspersed within about a 4-mile radius with the towns of the Israeli New Jersey groups. The future hijackers' towns included Patterson, Fort Lee, Totowa, Hoboken, and Elmwood Park. There were also FBI suspects in Jersey City, Harrison, Secaucus, and Hackensack. See Map 3. Atta, Al-Amari, and Ahmed Al-Ghamdi, though based in Hollywood and Al-Ghamdi, Delray Beach, Florida, were among the hijackers who had addresses in Patterson, Fort Lee, and Elmwood Park, as well as in South Wayne. Up to 6 or more of the hijackers appeared to have lived in Union Avenue and Patterson at the one time or another between March and August of 31st, 2001. The FBI's conclusion: the Israeli New Jersey group were Mossad intelligence operatives spying on local Arabs in Hudson and Bergen counties. There have been a number of press reports in the United States on Israeli New Jersey groups, most notably in the foreword, in the same article that reported on the Israeli DEA groups. The foreword states that the nature of the FBI's reviews of the case changed after the names of two of the 5 Israelis appeared on the CIA-FBI database of foreign intelligence operatives. This has been confirmed by a former chief of operations for counterterrorism within the CIA. At that point, the FBI launched a foreign counterintelligence investigation. All of the 5 men underwent polygraph tests, one of them 7 times. At the end of that investigation, the FBI concluded that the Israeli New Jersey group had been conducting a surveillance mission for Mossad, and that Urban Moving Systems served as a Mossad front. They further concluded that the Israelis were spying on local Arabs. That is the end of this video, the reading of the Gerald Shea Memorandum. Again, the Gerald Shea Memorandum was written by retired district attorney for California, most notably San Luis Obispo, California, Gerald Shea. It is regarding Israeli intelligence gathering operations on DEA facilities, as well as Arab nationals who had links to terrorism and Al-Qaeda, leading up to the September 11th, 2001 attacks. I hope you found this information helpful and useful, and if you have any questions, please comment below. Thank you.